Welcome back, everybody. I'm really pleased to welcome one of our good friends, Julian Roepcke, to the stage, who's going to join me now for the next 20 minutes to talk about the work that we've been doing, specifically on Syria, together as a coalition of organizations, whether it's Bellingcat, BILD, or other outlets, to really emphasize the power of collaboration between institutions to do investigations, based on the methods that you've been seeing throughout the morning sessions. So one of the challenges that you might remember from the sessions earlier is that we've been seeing campaigns happening in Syria, that there was certain narratives about what's happening on the ground. Christian was giving a great example of what happens when someone claims something happened, but in fact that the reality on the ground had been a complete different one. And so we want to use that concept to help tell you how the campaign that Russia has been conducting in Syria has been unfolding, and how using the innovative methods that we've been showing in the last day, how we can utilize them to separate between fact and fiction. Most of you remember when President Putin stepped before the UN General Assembly 2 years ago to announce that Russia was running a campaign against ISIL in Syria. However, very quickly we started seeing doubts, and even though there was doubt about the reality of that case, Russia still was pushing a lot of its own content, trying to push its narrative forward. And we started seeing a lot of really nice videos, including the one that you're seeing here currently on the screen. Now, the reason why I'm showing you that is because once there started to be some doubts about whether Russia was actually involved in attacking more than just ISIL, Lavrov stepped in and said, of course they aren't. They're here to just pursue their objectives of striking ISIL. And one, in fact, shouldn't be listening to the Pentagon, because the Pentagon is making it up. So what we decided to do is, we shouldn't be listening to the Pentagon on what is happening. We should actually be listening to the people who are carrying the strikes out, and that is the Russian government, which at the time was posting a lot of very interactive and nice footage from the ground. Again, here's a few examples. But something just didn't match up in all of that content that we started seeing online. Some of those videos that were being posted under the tag Russia versus ISIL seem to be somewhat out of place. And the reason why we're able to find it out is because digital Sherlocks, just like you guys and others, we started raising doubts about it online. And in fact, it got so intense that in the first 30 videos that were posted at the time by the Russian MOD, they were claiming to have been striking ISIL targets. How many of them do you think actually were striking ISIL targets? Any idea? Raise your hands if you think out of 30 targets. Oh, 2? Okay. All right. How many of them actually hit ISIL target? 1? That's pretty good. Yeah. Now, that's an issue. And as you will learn, the immediate response from Russia, of course, was, well, again, you shouldn't be listening to others. You should be relying on our methods of reporting. We have the maps that actually show where ISIL is. Because, in fact, the easy step would be to say, hey, we know you guys didn't hit ISIL because CENTCOM told us you did. Well, we actually didn't listen to CENTCOM or the Pentagon about whether they were hitting ISIL or not. We're using Russian MOD's own maps. And we're using these maps and cross-referencing them with publicly available information to geolocate and find the actual footages and see what territory it was. What we see here in black at the time was Russian-designated ISIL territory. But when we look at one of the footages here that Christian actually had raised in the table games, and compare it to public reports on the ground, we realize that what is being said on one side and what is being reported on the ground by individuals does not end up in the same location. As you see, we're zooming now from this first post into the green area, not into the black area. And while we were never able to find the alleged target on the right side in the area that Russia was claiming it was hit, in that ISIL area, we were actually able to find it in the opposition-held area. And that's something that we continue to see throughout the process and throughout the conflict in Syria, and something that also Julian was witnessing as he was reporting on it.
Yes, I mean, as Max said, we were cooperating in a way that at this time, mostly Bellingcat were helping us finding the locations. And what we could do with it then was further identifying not only where it was hit, this crucial work was already done, but we could also identify what was hit. And you have seen this in the other videos before, that while they were claiming they were hitting oil facilities or oil plants, in reality, what they helped mostly it was either civilian homes or abandoned military bases, or, and this was striking to us, grain silos as well as water treatment plants. And of course, I think all of us could have done this work of asking someone who is it. But of course, if a big newspaper, Germany's biggest newspaper like BILD, asks, for example, the Berlin Water Treatment Facility Management, or a company which works with grain silos in southern Germany, Bavaria, then they could, after we not just gave them the videos from the Russians, but also the original best quality satellite images, they could tell us very, very clearly and without any doubt that what Russia was hitting there and claiming to be oil facilities of ISIS, what's not only 200 kilometers away from the next ISIS position, it was also, it has nothing to do with the oil facilities, and it was purely civilian facilities, vital facilities to the civilian population, and thus war crimes they committed.
And the other thing is that it was not just about locations. Earlier, we also had played around with big arms and small arms, and that's also something that we've been seeing now here in Syria on the ground, where Russia was starting to be alleged of using the types of weapons that they were not supposed to use, the types of cluster ammunition and cluster bombs and others that they were saying they were not using. Now, again, it comes back to the same story as earlier and the same principle. We can say, well, we know you're using it because someone else told us, but we actually can look at Russia's own reporting, at its own propaganda channels. This is a photo provided by a Sputnik photographer. And if you look at this picture from an airfield in Syria, what you see in the corner here, you can zoom in, is an actual cluster bomb that Russia, in that same story, was saying it wasn't using. So sometimes, if you look closely enough, in the very news story that is meant to deceive you and distract you from reality, you actually see the actual truth hiding literally in plain sight in it. Now, we also had, of course, folks posting on the ground, which was really important. We had soldiers posting on the ground that, this is sliding quicker than I thought, that they were allegedly destroying weapons and other ammunition, and because Russia had these embedded reporters with them, we would then continue to pick up on evidence in Russia's own stories. Let me just skip through that real quick. But it's not just about the weapons that we were seeing, it's not just about the locations that we were seeing, it's also about the types of locations that we were seeing. Remember the CENTCOM case and the case of the mosque being struck? Well, Russia has been striking mosques too and claiming it hasn't. And what we see here is a footage from the ground being reported by an activist group saying that the mosque was struck. You actually see one of the white helmets on the ground. But Russia, of course, again was saying, look, we are the only folks with the objective monitoring means and you have to trust us. And this time around, they didn't just say they didn't do it. They actually also provided evidence saying, look, we have the latest satellite imagery. You can look at it and you'll see that we are actually completely innocent. We didn't do anything. Now, there was a problem with that whole thing because when we started looking for the mosque in illustration number 1, the mosque that the Russian MOD was claiming was in the frame and was left with no damage, we started to realize that the mosque is not really existing. We need to we ended up finding it somewhere else. We ended up finding it in a drone footage that was taken in the same city, but it was located somewhere else in that town. And so when we compared the actual location of the mosque and the location that the Russian government was claiming it was, we realized that the Russian government and the public were speaking about two different mosques. One of them, once we geolocate it, is here, and the other one is over here with the blue dome. Two very different types of builds, and that's important because if we look into the satellite image provided by the Russian government, we will see the mosque with the blue dome left completely untouched. But the mosque from which we had the footage on the ground provided by the activists with the white helmets on site, we can't see it in a satellite image provided by the Russian government because it's covered up with this white label. It's a paint job, literally, so to speak, to cover up the evidence of a war crime that was committed, of a strike that was perhaps intentional or unintentional. But we don't want to interpret that. What we do want to, however, observe is the fact that there's an intention to try to claim that something wasn't done, but actually was done. Now, let's skip that. Another important case here is the following video that I would like you to see.
قام طيران الحرب الروسي بشن غارة على مدينة سرمين. فتبين انه الغارة استهدفت مدرسة هي ملاصقة للمشفى الميداني، ولله الحمد ان المدرسة كانت خارجة عن العمل بسبب القصف الصادق للمدرسة. وكانت الدفاع المدني كانت قبل ما تشن الغارة بثواني دقائق عم تطلب من الناس انه تروح من المنطقة. وانا بالموقع عم بصور الغارة. فهون شن الطيران ضرب في الموقع اللي انا فيه على بعد مترين او 3 امتار بالصاروخ مني. اول ما وقع الصاروخ انا حسيت ان جسمي بده يتمزق من الضغط. مقابل الارض كل الناس عم تسمع صوت عياط، والناس ما منتبه علي انه في هون وقع مصاب. كان في شظير الصدر وحروق بايد اليسار، وشظايا بايد اليمين واجر اليسار، بالاضافه الى رطوب في كل الجسم والصدر، وشق كبير بالفك السفلي، اضافه الى شق بالعين.
Now this footage is really important because this is the type of footage that we would be seeing on the ground. In this case it was, as far as I remember, footage recorded by the white helmets as they're responding to one strike, and then there was a secondary strike upon arrival. But also, Julian, I remember you telling me that there's a lot of footage that, similar to that you were acquiring, that was really transforming the way that we understand these airstrikes. We don't just see anymore the footage from above, from the bird's eye view, recording the bombing, but increasingly there seems to always be a camera present when a strike happens.
Exactly. And this is why I think it is very important that we can say that we use the same methods that we used before in Ukraine, also in Syria, because there were so many people, even in areas which no journalist would ever have a chance to visit, no Western journalists. Like when Aleppo was totally besieged, we had a network, not really a network, but we had like more than 20 citizen journalists, reporters, everyone basically who could still speak English in the town and was still alive in the besieged areas, who gave us footage and who gave us reports from what's happening. And just one example is that there was, you remember this then, when there were time zones within every day, so certain periods of time between 10 in the morning and 7 in the evening, where the Russians said, we will not kill anyone in these 12 hours or something like this, and afterwards we start killing again. And we had people live also on our homepage putting up their phone and showing a Russian Su-25 at 25 minutes past 10. This was just one example, but you can imagine how almost hard to believe this was for us and for our viewers, seeing live images from Aleppo city of someone always showing his little radio there, showing the time, and then out of the window showing that there's Russian airplanes circling around and bombing people. So I think, yes, beyond all this footage from the Russian ministries and also from this media organizations, or opposition media organizations and aid organizations, these very, very normal people on the ground, which were just showing what they were seeing around them, this also added up to the whole case of finding evidence.
Looking at the time, I want to turn it over a little bit back into the room because we have so many people that have been dealing with the crisis in Syria to see what dire observations have been. I'm mostly picking here on Rao and Christian in one corner there, but also on others on this side. Tell us a little bit how, from your standpoint, how you think this trend of seeing much more cameras on the ground has transformed the work that you are doing. And I think we have someone with a mic. If Rao, you want to add to that real quick? Who has the mics? Where's our mic runner? Oh, there he is. I've geolocated the mic runner.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely seeing, a lot more ways to verify.
But was a
Wow. Oops, there you go. Go ahead.
Lots more ways to verify these incidents, especially because you have a lot of local civil society organizations that are now recording these things. Not just the white helmets, but the local council. So it's much more opportunities to actually see what the impact of if Russia or someone claims some airstrike hit a military target. You can show that this wasn't necessarily the case.
That's great. Thank you. Anyone else? Hi. Yeah, right back there. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead. Donara, do you want to send the mic that way? Or Nika, thank you.
Yeah, hi there. Just very briefly, John Paul Corcoran, UK Foreign Office. One thing that we've noticed that in a bit of picking these videos up, so are other types of media organizations who are, let's say, probably less trustworthy and got a slight agenda. So we're finding that even though you might find some relatively trustworthy information that's out there either on YouTube, it's also being investigated and used by these outlets, and therefore it's sort of tarnished, and therefore that same imagery that once you could have used to help verify something is actually unusable because it's quite easily rebutted as a consequence of it being picked up by those media organizations. So it's just a very quick point I wanted to put out there.
Thank you. Christian?
Cheers, thank you. No, this is absolutely fascinating to see how in this digital age we can indeed see where strikes are being conducted and so on. I think it's also worth noting that Russia kind of stepped down their campaign of publishing those videos. Over the past 1.5 years, we have seen very little amount of videos being published, and all of these videos suddenly have become very precise with their location, sometimes even the village they're striking. And many of them now are only in ISIS-held territories. And not to say that they're not striking non-ISIS-held territories, but it's very interesting to see how those videos have changed over time and how their claims have changed over time. What we've also been seeing after the first 2 months of those campaigns where they were saying we're striking ISIS, actually they weren't striking that many ISIS territories. So they changed their language from ISIS to just terrorists or militants or... I mean, then it starts to get, obviously it doesn't really matter who you're striking, it's just how you define terrorist or militant. It's just 2 comments, my 2 cents, but it's definitely interesting.
I think you're underscoring, Christian, a really important thing for everyone to notice here in the room is that once you had this community of digital Sherlocks picking up on the fact that Russia wasn't striking what it was saying it was, it started recognizing that and it started shifting its narrative to adopt it. It was no longer hashtag Russia versus ISIL, but it was suddenly Russia versus terrorists, and it's, the spectrum of who is a terrorist, a really far-reaching term. I want to skip a few here because we're running out of time, and we have our really great next session, so we're going to just jump all of that real quick. Ignore all of that. In the meantime, while I'm doing that, sorry about that. We want to switch to corruption here in about a minute. I'm just going to jump through a few slides. And maybe with what Julian just had said and what Christian had said, the question is also where do you think all of this is going to be heading long term with the cameras? Are they going to increase, or are we going to see restrictions in the way that we access data? Whoops. Can you skip that? Sorry, I'm going to have to fix that. Julian, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. I think You were mentioning that they were changing the kind of videos they are posting. I think it's true, and I think also Digital Sherlocks, they weren't cold so at this time, but did their part, so they did it. But still, we have to keep in mind that they also changed their strategy right now. They're bombing different areas, mainly different areas right now. And some people say, yes, this is because now they want to fight ISIS. Other people say, and I think they're much more right, is yes, because other forces on the ground led by America and American forces were advancing so fast against ISIS that they said, to get anything back from the east and from the north and the southeast of the country, we have to change our strategy, and we have to be faster than the SDF forces with the Americans in the north and the Free Syrian Army forces in the southeast. So I think this is another reason we have to be very honest.
We still have time for you to disagree.
You have a mic? Please disagree.
Yes.
I mean, maybe my neighbor wants to say something on it as well, because otherwise I'm speaking.
Yeah, I think with the Russian campaign here, a lot of it has to do with, you got to keep in mind so much of this is presented for domestic consumption within Russia itself, and Russia's official narrative was that in February 2016, they stopped publishing the regular updates, the daily updates from the Russian Center for Military Activities in Syria. In March 2015, they announced that they were reducing their forces in Syria. And then in May 2015, after the recapture of Palmyra for the first time, or May 2016, sorry. After the recapture of Palmyra, they had the victory concert. And from then onwards, Russia sought to present it as a campaign that was largely finished, and they stopped the broadcasting of their military activities almost entirely, and almost entirely they stopped presenting them to the domestic audience as well. So I think a lot more of it comes down to these domestic factors, and that they had wrapped up their public relations gains with the domestic population after Crimea, and they needed another short successful war, and they largely found that they had produced that, at least with a media effect, with the domestic population. And I think that's a really big, if not the defining factor in why they stopped showing so many of these videos.
Thank you for that. So I want to finish on, and I think this is a really important point that we all should think about. I want to finish on this concept of collaboration when it comes to monitoring these conflicts. You know, we all are from different institutions, but there's a really tremendous chance for us to really make a mark and set the record straight when it's necessary. We had this year not just the Atlantic Council cooperate with others, and the Bellingcat and BILD and so forth. We also had Amnesty run an investigation parallel to the conflict and the siege of Aleppo, as well as Human Rights Watch, which actually allowed us to really, in a really transformative and new way, capture the scale of the crisis and do so in the final days of it. So what I want to do is not just show you the two-dimensional aspect of the conflict, which usually has been a story of displacement, a story of the siege, a story of the ceasefire in the case of Aleppo, and the attacks and the hospital attacks, and of course the use of weapons and bombs that one was not supposed to use, but more importantly to show you how you can take all of that together and put it into not just a two-dimensional model and put it into a two-dimensional geolocation case, but as we will see now, take it a step farther, because we also want you to start thinking about not just where disinformation and verification and geolocation is today, but where it's going to be tomorrow and in the future. So I'll show, as an end to this session, a quick clip that our partners and friends at Forensic Architecture created for a repeated strike session on a hospital. And tomorrow, when we'll talk about the future of it, in the future of disinformation, we'll even look a step farther by playing a clip that Christian and the team had put together in the case of the CENTCOM case that you've seen. So let's take a look.
From June to December 2016, according to the Syrian American Medical Society, the Omar bin Abdulaziz Hospital, also known as M2, has been subject to 14 strikes by pro-government forces. The hospital has been damaged from inside and out. Video clips and still images taken in and around the hospital allow us to reconstruct some of the consequences of these strikes. Each photograph captures only a small part of the building, but composing and cross-referencing them allows us to reconstruct the architecture of the building and locate the images of the bombing. We locate the photographs with the model. The model then becomes the medium through which we can navigate between the different images and videos of the incidents. There are a number of CCTV cameras in the hospital that are continuously on, capturing every strike. We locate each camera and its orientation in the building. We integrate footage from the CCTV cameras, handheld videos, and photographs to reconstruct the interior spaces. This video, placed within the model, is from the strike on July 16, 2016. Locating each video clip in space provides a tangible link between them, verifying their place and constructing their relation to each other. We follow the civilians as they move through the targeted building. On the ground floor, there are 4 CCTV cameras, and each captures the consequence of the strikes. This CCTV camera captures one of the corridors leading to an exit from the building. This video of medical staff transporting a wounded person to an ambulance provides an essential link between inside and outside. As they load the wounded person into an ambulance, we can see the disposition of buildings outside, a fact that helps us verify the location of the building. According to the UN, by mid-August 2016, Omar bin Abdulaziz Hospital was one of only 3 hospitals in Aleppo offering intensive care, and the only hospital left with a pediatric department caring for children. 2016 was the most dangerous year for health workers in Syria. 14 strikes targeted Omar bin Abdulaziz M2 hospital in a span of 6 months. June 3rd, June 14th, July 14th, July 16th, August 1st, August 5th, August 11th, August 14th, September 23rd, September 26th, September 28th, November 18th, December 4th, December 14th.
So as you can see here, this really captures how far we can take these types of methods that we are showing you the last day and the day ahead. Again, you'll see another complementing similar recapture tomorrow when we talk about the future of this information.